Richard Burton was the Welsh miner's son who left the valleys to become probably one of the most acclaimed stage actors of his generation. Burton had the looks, the charisma, and that fantastic voice. But in the eyes of some, he sacrificed his artistic promise by becoming a huge Hollywood star. He was permanently plastered across the newspaper front pages and more famous for his lifestyle and relationship with Elizabeth Taylor than for his roles and his talent. It was a criticism Burton didn't necessarily reject. In interviews throughout his career, he would openly admit that he was driven by money and that he didn't rate many of his own performances, downplaying perhaps his 7 Oscar nominations for Best Actor. We join Burton here for an interview with Michael Elwyn from the 1965 programme My Time Again, which begins with him discussing the craft of acting.
How absorbed into a part do you get? I mean, you seem to use little theatrical tricks in this. It is very much your own brooding personality and voice with little technical means of getting something over. How much, do you feel in a part?
Well, I didn't think that I was capable of, I don't know quite what the word is, but when you get close to a part, in my case, it's sort of osmosis, the transference of something from one thing to the other, that I actually begin to feel curiously like the character that I'm playing, even if it's in a film. And I'm not by any means a method actor. I don't deliberately think myself into these kind of things. But there is an odd thing that does happen, I think, when you're totally absorbed in a part.
Yes.
I'm a fairly grey fellow, latterly very grey, and live within myself as to because I'm playing a part who is grey and lives within himself, is not heroic, anti-heroic. I wouldn't accept a fight from anybody at the moment, though maybe a year ago I would have.
You made your name playing Hamlet, Henry V, Iago, Coriolanus, roles like these, and never Troilus, Florizel, Romeo. How
I
alien?
hate those parts.
It's completely alien, is it? Sort of the open expression of emotion.
I think Romeo is probably the worst part ever written by anybody that's so famous, I mean. There are worse parts. I once played Ferdinand in The Tempest. I tell you a story about when you start to get the bad notes, it's interesting to collect them. My favorite bad notes in the world is for Ferdinand in The Tempest. It was a kind of stand-in, a kind of understudy for Romeo and all those abject Shakespearean heroes who quite clearly are ladies. And I was playing this part, Ferdinand in The Tempest, and I loathed it with a passionate intensity, and I begged them to let me out of it. I said, I'll be one of the dancers, I'll be a nymph, anything. I said, but don't let me play this dreadful, diabolical Ferdinand. However, they forced me to play it, and I'm not short, but then I'm not tall either. I'm exactly 5 feet 10.5 inches in height, and I tend to width. They put me in a costume that had bunches of grapes over here, so that I looked like some strange Welsh Stone Age troglodyte. And I pretended that I wasn't on the stage. And I had a little toy sword in my hand, and those terrible things they give you in Shakespearean clothes that make your legs look about 2 inches high. And I was perfectly convinced that nobody knew I was on the stage. And indeed, the critics were suitably kind. They all said I contributed effectively to the atmosphere or something like that, except for an old friend of mine called Ken Tynan, who said, this is the first time in our experience that we've ever seen Ferdinand played by a bull.
You moved on from the English theatre to Hollywood when you were, well, as many people have said, on the threshold of greatness in the English theatre. Did you leave for financial reasons, or has the cinema always held a stronger fascination for you than the live theatre?
No, not particularly, no. I went to Hollywood and I made a couple of films, both of which were very successful. One was called My Cousin Rachel and the other was called The Robe. And then I, if you call about the threshold, I was on the threshold then of earning, I suppose, a great deal of money. And I was very sensible, I thought, and went back to the Old Vic and played for a year at the Old Vic, and therefore got into debt. I played Hamlet and Coriolanus and the Bastard in King John and Caliban and I've forgotten what all. And then I went back to Hollywood again, did another film, then went back to the Old Vic for another year. And I spread it out fairly evenly between the two worlds. Greatness is a word I don't understand.
I asked the question because you seem to have spent a long time in cinema trying to come to grips with the camera, and critical success has eluded you until recently in Beckett and Night of the Iguana.
Yeah, well, the reason for that is over there. That's my wife. You know, she knows a great deal about film acting, and she persuaded me that I mustn't pretend that film acting is just a means of filling in time between stage performances. Yeah. And indeed made me work at it, which I'd never done. I think, fundamentally, profoundly believed that film acting was only an excuse for acting until, as you very kindly pointed out latterly, you know, the last 3 or 4 years.
You feel you're now beginning to feel at home?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go so far as to think that I'm good or anything like that in the film half of the business, but certainly I try much harder than I did.
Do you film more because basically you're Byronic and the location work and the traveling and the unreal atmosphere makes just as big a contribution to your own personal happiness as does the actual creating of a role?
Yeah, that's a dicey question. Byronic is such an extraordinary word to apply. Well, I don't like traveling very much.
Around the world. You don't?
Yeah, no. I like being in places. I hate getting there. I hate planes. I don't mind trains, and I don't mind boats. But nowadays one has to fly everywhere, so I hate getting from one place to the other. Also, we have an enormous family, and traveling from one place to the other with 4 children is not easy. No, that has nothing to do, I don't think, with the film business, my desire to travel or my lack of desire. It's just that one has to.
If I could change tack, how important is the literature of theatre to you?
Immensely important, much more important than anything else, I think.
What do you read and who and?
I don't read plays very much. I don't like plays to read, except, of course, Shakespeare. My chief world, I suppose, as a reader is almost entirely poetic, or the opposite, detective stories. I'm a voracious reader, omnivorous. I will read anything. But the thing that draws me back all the time is poetry. I'm not really interested in Brecht or any of the non-poetic writers. People who are quite clearly instinctively poetic, like John Osborne or Harold Pinter, who, despite the fact that they write in prose, are unquestionably poets, are fascinating. Or like the man that I'm going to play next, that I never played, Edward Albee. Though he writes in prose, there's no question about this man's stupendous eloquence and poetry. But to play some of those chaps who write sort of Lonsdale comedies or anything like that never interested me at all.
If you wrote a play, would it be in verse or?
If I wrote a play, it would be a monologue, and I would play the central part.
Do you have any plans to return soon to the live theatre in England? I mean, I know you've done Hamlet recently on Broadway, but this was your first return to classical roles for a long time. Are we going to?
Yes, I think next year I go back to Oxford, to our university, and play Faustus, Mahler's Faustus, with Dr. Neville Coghill directing. And the rest of the company, apart from Helen of Troy, which shall be nameless, will be played by the boys at Oxford.
That performance of Dr. Faustus did go ahead, with Burton and Elizabeth Taylor waiving any salaries, and Taylor taking the non-speaking part of Helen of Troy. The pair of them also faced some prickly prodding from the press once the production had ended.
You must at some time, Richard Burton, have faced the question of whether you should have continued as an imposing and, even in the view of many people, great stage actor, or moved into the world of films, which is more commercially rewarding, but perhaps not so rewarding artistically. Do you ever regret having moved into the commercial cinema?
Oh, excuse
You
me,
are.
Richard. That makes me so angry. Because he has not left the stage. That's absolute bloody rubbish. Well,
Elizabeth,
last
put
year,
yourself together.
he just got through doing a thing here for Oxford on the stage. The year before that, what was he doing on Broadway? That was the stage.
But-
How can you say he's left the
Because
stage?
that is not a continuous stage career in the sense that, for example, Paul Schofield or Laurence Olivier.
He's not continuous either on the stage. He does
Schofield
film
is more or
appearances
less
for
continuous.
money,
This is the
and so
first
does Paul Schofield.
that Schofield has made one film in 10 or 14 years. And Richard was at one time, after Coriolanus particularly, hailed as being potentially the greatest stage actor that England ever produced. I wonder whether, in a way, your making of Faustus, which is the story of a man who sells out for a dream almost, is perhaps comparable with your decision then.
No, I don't think so, because one of the differences, I think, between myself and some other actors is the fact that they really have almost an anguish. For instance, Sir John Gielgud, who's almost my favorite actor in the world, and I think most of us. John really is helpless. He's upset unless he gets onto the stage and gets his teeth into a part, even though it's a part perhaps he doesn't want to play. It just has to be there. I don't have that sense of compulsion. Also, I need roughly about 6 weeks of active playing after the rehearsals, after you've opened, before the part matures as fully as I can make it, and then it begins to crack and flaw. I don't have, I have enormous energy, but I don't have that kind of moral stamina that Laurence Olivier has and Paul has and John has to go on, you know.
I wanted to ask Elizabeth Taylor if your irritation then was because you felt that the cinema was not the creative medium
No,
that the theatre
I don't
was.
like
I didn't know why you
myself.
got so cross.
Because you said the exact phrase that I knew you were working up to, sold out, and it offends me to my soul. I'm going to
Well,
sell
now, Sister-
out, I hope one day, to the stage. It's exactly the same thing. If I go on the stage, I'm selling out.
You mean you feel that the two arts are in their own mediums
Of
just
course
as
they
comparable?
are.
Quite. So you reckon that Richard Burton's cinema performance is as creative as anything that he could have done on the stage?
It's just as tasking, perhaps sometimes more tasking, because it's more difficult,
Well, I don't know about that.
technically.
But
I mean,
also,
if you
I
have to
think,
start into
David,
a scene
that,
where you have a flow, and you stop for 2 hours, and then you start again, I promise you, your concentration has to be really finely whittled down.
But anyway, David, I think usually that sold-out business is written in England. Now,
Chief journalist.
Now, I left England in 1957, so the last play I did was in England, was in 1957. Since that time, I've done 6 plays, 5 of which were enormous successes in New York. But since you've disappeared from the London scene, they sometimes tend to think that you're not still acting on the stage, you know. And I don't think I don't care whether they think I've sold out or not. I know whether I've sold out or not.
One thing you have said, Richard, about your life with Elizabeth Taylor is that it is a continuous excitement, but one can never really be sure what he's going to do next, as I found out just now. Would you say that the excitement will continue?
No, we enjoy each other's company very much, and people of very high temperament, as you know, as you may have noticed from Elizabeth.
Indeed, yes.
And we find it very difficult to be apart from each other for more than 2 or 3 hours. And in fact, our film careers are absolutely, film and stage, absolutely bound up with the fact that we must never, ever be separated.
You don't mind being known as the Laurel and Hardy?
I name me that.
And I said, what's wrong
What's
with that?
wrong?
We should be so lucky.
Do you ever wish you weren't so beautiful? You were not born so
Oh,
beautiful?
God, I just wake up every morning saying, Jesus, if only I weren't so gorgeous. What do you mean?
Well, you are. You are. You are.
Yes, he said,
But
what do you
isn't
mean?
it
Of course
what
she
I
doesn't
mean?
wish she wasn't beautiful.
No, but sometimes a woman does. Sometimes a woman who is an actress says, God, if I weren't, then, you know, they'd take me more seriously, as Richard is saying.
You know,
Occasionally or not.
Once heard of those mythical, apocryphal actresses who jump into a bath of milk every morning and splash themselves, I am beautiful, I am beautiful, I am
Yeah.
beautiful. Elizabeth doesn't do that. A bath of gin.
Do you,
I don't like gin. Champagne, look.
Richard Burton's marriage to Elizabeth Taylor would last into the next decade. But by 1974, the years of high living and hard drinking had taken their toll, as Barry Norman explored in an interview on the set of Burton's latest film, The Voyage.
Over the past 10 years, Burton has probably become as famous for his flamboyant purchases of yachts and aeroplanes and fur coats and fabulous diamonds as for his acting. The Burton-Taylor marriage, as far as one can ever tell with such a volatile couple, is now over, but it was certainly exciting while it lasted. Quarrels, reconciliations and the frequent exchange of lavish presents. And always on Burton there was the dominating influence of his wife.
Richard, looking back on your career, it seems to be divided in two almost exactly by Cleopatra. Would you agree with that it changed course completely after Cleopatra?
Well, I don't know. I think my life was changed by a woman, you know, who's called Elizabeth Taylor. I'm not entirely sure what exactly she did to me, but certainly I don't know exactly what to say, but those people, you know, like Laurence Olivier and Paul Scofield and Marlon Brando and Elizabeth Taylor and people like that, they're very rare, very strange, very odd, very perverse, and they obviously believe that they are very extraordinary people in their odd way, and they believe firmly, of course, that they are gifted by God or something like that. Unfortunately, I don't believe that, you see. I mean, about myself. There is unquestionably a kind of passion, a strange idiocy, where you walk on the stage or you walk on the screen or whatever it is, and you feel a strange kind of power. I defy the power, of course.
What would you say it is that you do when you're up there in front of the camera?
No, I think I'm a sort of animal. I get on there and I don't out the words and I have a reasonable voice and so on, and I just get out there and become an animal in some strange way, in the same way that the other people become animals, except that they believe that they are fundamentally powerful and beautiful and so on. I don't believe that at all. Certainly I'm not powerful, certainly I'm not beautiful, but I don't understand what these fellows do, except that I appreciate what they do, if you know what I mean.
But then what keeps you going in the same profession?
Money.
But you don't need the money now, surely.
You've got to be joking. I've got about 50,000 people to take care of. I have to pay everybody off. I have to pay lawyers, legends. I have to keep this dog. You know. At the moment, I'm doing all right. I pick up a lot of money for films, and I don't know. I don't know. And it's absolute nonsense. The whole idea of the film business is nonsense. On the stage, of course, I'm absolutely sure, I'm certain I can go anywhere and play anything, but I don't really know what prompts the imagination of the public. Sure. It's a funny Chinese dog, the only Chinese dog who speaks Welsh. No, I really think it's very odd and very perverse. Laurence Olivier once said that were it not for the fact that he were an actor, he would have gone mad. And I'm beginning to think that I would have gone mad too. But I don't put myself in the same, of course, category as Laurence Olivier, because he really loves the theatre. He's obsessed by it and so on. I'm not.
On what basis now do you choose the roles you're going to play in movies? Because sometimes you seem to make very curious choices. Films like Bluebeard, for instance, and Hammersmith is Out. One wonders why you chose to do those films.
Yeah, I long to be a failure.
And?
And I am a failure.
Well, yeah, but a very successful failure.
No, no, I manage. I get along. I'm afraid that in about 5 or 6 months I'm going to go back on the stage. Terrifies me, it appalls me, but I'll go back on the stage.
Why? I mean, is it sheer masochism?
Perhaps. Never thought of that.
Richard, where do you go from here? I mean, how do you envisage your future? Are you going to go back to the stage? Are you going to continue making movies? You once told me you were going to retire.
I think that the essential thing that I must do is quietly room myself into the grave, you know, sleep. Sleep is so fundamental. Did I ever tell you that poem about sleep? I bet I didn't.
No, I don't think you did.
Yeah.
But is it going to be back to the theatre or more movies?
No. The only thing that's important are the children and Elizabeth and being alive, I suppose, in a sort of extraordinary way. I don't know. I really don't know.
That sounds a very depressed attitude for you to be taking. I would have thought that in the position you're in now, you would be feeling much more bucked up about things.
You know, you must understand, Barry, that I'm sending you up.
I thought you might be.
Yeah. I think I'm reasonably intelligent, clever, good, kind, sweet, nasty.
Gifted?
Oh, no. I'm not gifted. No.
But do you feel very vulnerable then when you're acting?
I hate acting.
Well, you did tell me a few years ago that you were planning to give it up. But you're still doing it. You made a lot of films since then.
I have to make the money, love. I have to make the money. You know, if you give your wife a jewel or something like that, costing him, shall we say, about $100,000 or whatever it is, what the hell are you going to do, you know? I just count the shekels, and I count the money.
Do you really do it just for the money, though, Richard?
Now, Barry.
I mean,
you're in a very, very, very strange state. Who knows what happens? I don't know. May I have a cigarette?
By all means, yes. Do you enjoy this superstar status, the tremendous celebrity, the fact that you can't move without being mobbed? Do you really enjoy it, that kind of life?
If it stops, I'm dead.
Just 2 months later, Burton was divorced and had just spent 6 weeks in hospital battling his legendary alcoholism. But he was still able to undergo another interview, this time with Michael Parkinson.
You're welcome. Let's talk about that background of yours, because it does interest me. I mean, the path you've come has been quite extraordinary. As I said in the introduction, you think that some novelist had written it, and if a novelist did write it, indeed, you could accuse him of over-exaggeration. Because, all right, the background, humble, comparatively so. Right, we've agreed on that. What, in fact, did it give you, though, that background, Richard, do you think?
I think a tremendous sense of strength, I suppose, because I presume that if you survive such a... I'm talking like Churchill now, isn't it funny? If you survive such a background, you must have come from an extraordinary race of people. I'm enormously proud, of course, of being Welsh.
this extraordinary voice of yours, would you say that, in fact, it's a kind of Welsh voice? Is there such a thing?
Oh, yes, it's the deep, dark answer from the valleys to everybody. I can't help the voice. It's part of me, and I didn't cultivate it or anything. It was given to me. And I'm very lucky to possess it, I suppose. Certainly, it's not a gift that I would wish on anybody else.
Why?
Too powerful.
Too much competition, perhaps, huh? Can we go back to something you mentioned earlier on, Dylan Thomas?
Can we go back to what?
Can we go back to... You're a mimic, aren't you? You can mimic most people quite accurately.
No, I can't, actually.
You can't?
No, I can do some. Yeah. I might do you, Michael, by the end of the day.
Who can you do?
Oh, I suppose I can do quite a few actors and so on.
Like who?
Well, I can do Laurence Olivier.
Could you?
Yes. Right now?
Please.
Now, I have to pitch my voice up a bit because his voice is rather higher toned than mine. So I have to do it physically. Do you mind?
No, that's
Can you pick the camera up?
Absolutely. They'll follow you. That's what they're there for.
All right, here he comes. Richard III, right?
Really?
Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this sun of York and all the clouds that lowered about our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried.
Who else, Richard?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I'll do anybody else in case I get into trouble.
Do that marvellous... over lunch, you did the marvellous Lee Marvin one, which must be the other extreme.
Oh, well, yes. Well, Lee Marvin's a very strange man and very beautiful and very extraordinary, but he becomes, when he's had a few drinks, he becomes incoherent in the most splendid possible way. He makes a series of sounds that really takes one's breath away. Sorry, I'm not able to speak now because I'm getting incoherent the way that Lee Marvin does occasionally. And he says to, well, we just did a film together in the United States, and he said to O.J. Simpson, who we know is probably the greatest athlete in the world, enormous, fantastic, splendid black man. And Lee was trying to explain to him how to act. Now, he started off all right, Lee. He was very good. Started off perfectly well. And then it degenerated, his language degenerated into kind of noises. And he said to O.J.,
You know what acting's about, do you? It's kind of... That's what you do, baby.
I look fat on that monitor. I'm not fat, actually.
No, indeed, you're not. You're looking very trim indeed.
Yeah,
very trim. You mentioned earlier on Dylan Thomas, too. He had a most remarkable voice, didn't he? I remember the first time I ever heard that voice. It was rather... I tell you what struck me about him, actually. It was rather a posh voice, wasn't it?
Well, yes, he used to call himself +4s and no breakfast, or chiffon and cut glass, his particular accent. Actually, Dylan, of course, was a very extraordinary man, a genius, I suppose. And I'll give you an example of what Dylan was like. We all had to go to a poetry reading, and I was there, and Dylan, and Dame Edith Sitwell, and Dame Edith Evans, and Louis MacNeice. It was at the Lyric Hammersmith, I remember that. And John Gielgud was the overall director of the whole thing. So I said, could you get Dylan, I said in my subtlest way, to speak Tennyson, because I know he hates Tennyson. So John arranged it so that Dylan spoke Tennyson, and the poem was, "The splendor falls on castle walls and snowy summits old in story. The long light shakes across the lakes and the wild cataract leaps in glory. Blow, bugles, blow, let the wild echoes," something. And answer, echoes, answer, dying, dying, dying. And so it goes on. And the envoi is always dying, dying, dying. So Dylan was suddenly forced to speak this poem. And so, again, usually I can only do things physically. I have to do it, right? Right. So he gets now, the splendor falls on castle walls and snowy summits old in story. And, of course, an eternal woodbine in his mouth. Right? The long light shakes across the lakes, and the wild cataracts leap in glory. Blow, bugles, blow, set the wild echoes flying, and answer, echoes, answer, dying, dying, dying. Then he gets to the last verse. And I thought, what's he going to do to show his absolute hatred of Tennyson? He's got to show it in the words that he says. So he gets to the last, and he says, "Oh, love, they die on yon rich sky. They faint on hill and field and river. Their echoes roll from soul to soul and go forever and forever. Blow, bugles, blow. Set the wild echoes flying and answer, echoes, answer. Dying, dying. Oh, dying."
He was ultimately, of course, a very tragic man, wasn't he?
Well, I suppose so. He sought his own death, and he found it, which is not entirely tragic. He certainly wrote, of course, the most magical things, and he's alive.
Yes.
I mean, he's alive.
Yeah. Well, but one gets a sense of waste, though, surely, when you think. I mean, surely he left behind him stuff that will live forever, but he might have left more behind him.
No, I don't think so. I think he's much the same as, well, Michael, you say a sense of waste, I wouldn't quarrel with that. But I think he probably burned himself out.
That he I sort of fulfilled the notion a lot of people have about the Welsh, the Celts actually generally, about the sort of death wish that they have, the creative people. Do you, first of all, accept that they have this this kind of headlong rush toward the edge?
Yes, I think that we rather love precipices. We go towards them and withdraw now and again, temporarily. Sometimes we go over the edge. Certainly it's true in Dylan's case. I would say I wouldn't pretend to know exactly what went on in his extraordinary head, but certainly he searched for destruction.
Did you ever feel that way yourself? Have you ever felt yourself going toward the precipice and pulling back short of it?
Well, yes, I have. Yes, I think we all do, we Celts.
Would you care to tell me how? In what circumstance?
Well, there was a second or two, I think, perhaps about a year ago, when I didn't fancy much staying alive.
Really? You contemplated suicide?
Oh, no. No. No, I wouldn't kill myself in the ordinary sense of the word. I wouldn't take pills or drugs or anything really in that sense. But I did suddenly wake up one morning and found how splendidly rich and extraordinary the world was, and that I couldn't bear its richness and its beauty. And in order to obviate the idea of the richness and extraordinary beauty of the world, I thought it's best to leave it. We all know that we're going towards an inevitable doom. It's rather interesting to deliberately go towards and then withdraw, because nobody else has been there and withdrawn. But I've been there. I've seen that dark wood. I know how terrible it is, how frightful it is, and how frightening it is. But I went there and came back.
Coming back would eventually mean 3 more weddings. One, a short-lived reunion with Elizabeth Taylor, and then to Susan Hunt, and finally to Sally Hay. Coming back also meant some notable career successes. Equus earned Burton rave reviews on the stage, and his role in the movie version that followed won him a Golden Globe. He narrated the smash hit that was Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, and scored a huge box office hit with the film The Wild Geese. In fact, in spite of his health problems, he found it impossible to stop working, as he explained in a documentary in 1983.
Once Elizabeth said, it'd be a very good idea if you took a year off, because you never stop. Because she's only done 30-something films, 35 films, and she's been a star since she was 8. And, but she takes time off. I never have. I've done the most utter rubbish in order to have somewhere to go in the morning. So she said, take a year off. So I said, okay, we had a lovely house in Mexico, sunny, everything. I lasted 5 weeks. I was off. I did a film, like, well, I won't bother to tell you about it.
Oh, come on. Let's hear it.
No, a man came to see me and he said, you know, we got a lot of wastage on the floor of a film called Tobruk. I said, oh, have you? He said it was, it made $6 million. I said, did it? I said, who's in it? He said, Rock Hudson and George Peppard. And he said, no, what I did was I picked up all these bits off the floor and I put them all together. And I got all the writers in, Universal Studios. Universal Studios is still run like the old studios was, with a big boss and all that. So I said to the 10 writers, you know, make out of this, make a script so that we can use the long shots and use Burton in the close-ups. And they did it. And they made a doable film. And I was so fascinated, I couldn't resist it. And we went off and we shot the film in, I don't know, 3 weeks and 2 days or something. And the film went out and was successful. It's called Raid on Rommel. And all the long shots, it's Rock Hudson. And all the close-ups, it's an Englishman called Green. And all the long shots, it's George Peppard. And all the close-ups, it's me. 1 year, I earned $8 million for one film. I got paid $1 million for the film, and the film was so successful that another $7 million came in. I remember getting a check just before Christmas, about 3 days before Christmas, for $1 million, which added to the rest. And it's not that I'm frightened of the money or anything like that. It's not my profits. I give it away. Give it to my family, or I buy enormous presents for Elizabeth Taylor, or did, or for Susan, or for Sally, who's the next one up. I cannot hold on to it. I hold on to a little piece of property with a roof on the house, and that's all.
What's the worst film you've made?
I don't know. I made some lousy ones in my time. See, I always start off, usually, not that one, with very good intentions. You know, the script seems very good. The director has a tremendous reputation. The producer is a good producer. And you start off and you suddenly realize after 2 weeks you're in a piece of rubbish. And there's nothing you can do about it. Now, in a play, oddly enough, I've done almost exactly the same number of plays as I've done of films. In a play, I've only had one real failure, which was in New York. I mean, we only ran for 2 weeks or something like that. And a good play, too, by Ennui. But I think it was misdirected and miscast, and I don't think I was very good, all that. But whether that is the fact that you yourself can change a play without benefit of director, as long as you've got a good lighting man and who can light the damn thing properly, and good actors around you, you can actually do things with an indifferent piece, which you can't do with the film. Well, you know, I've never thought much of myself as an actor. And I don't mean to be modest, but at the same time, I don't think there's been any particular successful thing that I've ever done, that one particular one that gave me any special pleasure. I think the fact that I was able to take care of a certain amount of people has given me some pleasure. The fact that I had the power to do it. But then there are some people, maybe 3 or 4 in the world, I mean outside my family, whom I love. You know, I trust them with my life, and I've had to sometimes. And all the things, all the troubles that they've gone through, you can imagine, as a result of the enormous publicity that I've had in my life. And never once have they ever worried me about it, or said, hey, stop doing this, or stop doing that, or you're being a bad boy, or anything like that. They've been terribly good with me, always. They're a marvelous family. And apart from my family and 2 or 3 other people, very few people I would trust with anything.
This was Richard Burton's last interview for the BBC. His final role, for which he was critically acclaimed, was as the menacing O'Brien in the movie of George Orwell's 1984, in which he co-starred with John Hurt. 2 months before the film premiere, Burton suffered a brain hemorrhage and died at home in Switzerland. He was 58. In the obituaries, one of the most quoted anecdotes was his response to a telegram he once received from Sir Laurence Olivier that said, "Make up your mind, dear heart. Do you want to be a great actor or a household word?" Burton's answer was immediate. He simply said, "Both."
2 of his films coming up tonight, beginning with The Desert Rats, next on BBC 4.